Spiros, welcome. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for the introduction and the right pronunciation of the name.
So you're a product manager at Prisma. You're currently residing in Athens, Greece, and you've been building digital products for over 10 years, and you've worked in different roles as a designer, developer, and then finally settling in the last 5 years as a product manager. And prior to Prisma, you were at Contentful. And today, I believe that you'll be talking about the Prisma Data Platform. So with that, I would like to give you the stage. Are you ready to share your screen?
Yes, let me do that. And I can start if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect.
Also, a quick note that we'll be dropping a link to the raffle in the chat so you can just participate by clicking on that. So now, without any further delay, I give you Spiros.
All right, thank you. So thank you for coming to the meetup. And today I want to talk to you about a product launch and maybe two things that we will be releasing with this product launch. But first, just a quick introduction. So as you know, I'm Spiros. I'm a product manager, and I'm working with a team that is called Developer Productivity. And our mission, if I can connect a bit the team with what I'm going to show you later, is that we want to enable developers to feel more productive when working with Prisma on their projects by providing them with tools and integrations that fit with their environment and stack. And in more concrete terms, this means that the kinds of the products and the features that we are maintaining and building are the Prisma Studio that you all know that you use to browse your data locally. It's the VS Code extension, the Nexus plugin, and there's also this new thing that I'm going to talk to you about. So it's a product release of sort of two things. The first thing is a Prisma Data Platform, as the title says, which is a bit of a longer, a bigger, a grander vision that we have, something that its ambition is to guide us in the next 1 or 2 years towards building something, a platform that will help solve a lot of the problems that we have seen from research and from some of our chats with you. And a bit closer than this, maybe long-term vision, is what we are going to release in the next few weeks, which is the first step towards realizing this vision, which is the hosted data browser. And the hosted data browser is maybe a longer term for describing the studio that you're using now locally, that we will host it on the cloud for you. First, let's start with the Prisma Data Platform. And we use internally this vision statement to align towards what we want, what we mean by this data platform. And a first important distinction is that this is an application data platform. It's not something like an analytical data platform. So it's an application data platform that aims to bring developers, data owners, and infrastructure teams together. So we're now starting to target more folks of your team, more of your colleagues, and it liberates access to data, enabling teams to bring applications from prototype to billion user scale without compromising productivity, security, or compliance. So there are a lot of terms there, and it seems like a lot of words, a lot of sentences, but behind every term in this statement, there is a lot of research, and there are some problems that we have seen and we have uncovered from some of our research with you, or by studying large applications and teams that are building these applications, and the kinds of problems that these kinds of teams are facing when they're talking to their database. And I don't have something more concrete in terms of a mock-up or a prototype to show you, but when it comes to the data platform, it's basically these components, if we can call them like that. You can already maybe identify with the green boxes at the bottom the client, which is what you are using now in your backend service so that you talk to the database. But in this future, you will not be connecting directly to the database, but there will be a component that we call a data mesh, and it will be its responsibility to connect to the different databases. So you can already see here that there are some examples of data sources. We now support the different flavors of relational databases. You might have picked up that we're working on MongoDB. And Redis or whatever other platforms might come into the future, or maybe other data sources that are not necessarily data stores. It could be a CMS or a customer data platform. And the data mesh sits in between you and your data sources, right? Its role is that it's combining this data. It's making sure that it's arriving safely to you. It's also, since you will be connecting to many different systems, you don't want to be as weak as your weakest link. So there will be some sort of an optimization layer on top of that, some sort of caching that will be smartly refreshed when something changes. There is also the development databases and environments, which is what the current migrate feature set will evolve to. And at the left, you see the control plane, which is what you will use in order to interact with the data mesh. Like data, you can think of the data mesh as the infrastructure, and the control plane will be the thing that you will be interacting through with it, and it will have things like browsing data. It will have things like the data catalog. You will be able to manage the access control deep all the way down to the database. So not just like who can view data on the control plane, but also like who queries what. And there are many things around, many ideas around development workflows. For example, you might be able to test some queries and measure their impact or their performance over time. And one thing before we get into this nice slide is that some of these terms that you might see here, like data mesh or data catalog, they might sound familiar if you have worked in the analytical domain, data domain. This doesn't mean that we're shifting our focus, that we're going into that direction, but rather we have seen that these features have proven very valuable and useful in that domain. So we're thinking that they could also help you in managing and connecting to your application data. So what we're imagining is that we're imagining you being able as a data owner to connect many different data sources and maybe creating a combined data API that you will give to your new team that was just onboarded, for example, and you will not have to worry about any security or like trying to find the right person to set up the database. An idea is that you could be spinning up development databases, and instead of just cloning a database or a repo, you could also be able to get the live data so that you can, the production data, so that you can code against the real use case. But of course, all the privacy concerns will be taken care of. So maybe usernames and passwords and emails could be obfuscated in the copy that you would get. Access control, as we said before, so it is very important, especially when you start bringing a lot of different teams in a large organization with a lot of different data, that you keep track of who has access to what. I talked about the performance layer with caching on top of all these different data sources. So you should be able to take take advantage of that caching layer and have fast queries, but you could also get metrics that will tell you when something is taking longer than expected, and then maybe integrating these metrics towards your monitoring service of choice, like Datadog. And lastly, we envision that you would also be able to index your data so that your teammates across the entire organization would be able to find the model or the field even that they are looking for. So if I'm a new developer, we're a new team that we want to build an application that needs to access some customer information, we would not go there and create a new database if the data is already there. You could use the data catalog and find it. So these are kind of the components that we are envisioning. So we are building some of these parts. A lot of these are ideas, and of course, it's going to be a continuous conversation with you to see which of these you will find useful, which of these might not be useful. What our team, the development productivity team, is starting from is this part, the data browser part. right, which is this one. And this is this hosted data browser feature, which is the first step towards achieving our Prisma Data Platform product vision. And we had plenty of ideas in the beginning of the year when we were discussing how can we tackle this huge topology of components. And for the control plane, we had some ideas like the data browser, which we're now building, some functionality on top of your schema management, an idea around optimizing or running your queries in isolation. And we built a lo-fi prototype that we tested with some of you. And thank you to the ones who had participated in these calls in the beginning of the year. And eventually, we decided that we will start with the data browser. The reasons were many. First, in the prototypes, this received maybe the most positive feedback from people who would use this. We also had other feedback from GitHub issues. People were asking how can they host Studio and how can they put this behind a sign-up form. And also technically, we wanted to get off the ground as fast as possible. And the Studio was technically the most ready feature that we had that we could put up on the cloud. So we decided to start with this first. And the goal of the project, as we stated it in the beginning, was that we want, with the data hosted browser, we want to enable teams to collaboratively use Studio on their online databases. And there are two keywords here to watch. The online part. So far you had been using Studio locally to read the data that you have in your local host. And we're going to change that. We're going to add this new online capability. And collaboratively means that you will be able to add your colleagues or maybe your customer if you're an agency, and give them the possibility to view and manage the content on this online database. So I'm going to be bold now and do a live demo, but rule number one of live demo is don't do live demos. So I have a recording now, and I hope that I sync my words with the video. So the first thing that we will need in this platform, this is live actually, it's in a hidden URL somewhere on the web that I will not share unless you want to use it. So we're going to use your GitHub account, and we need this because we are going to connect to the Prisma schema file that you will have in your GitHub repo. So once you connect, you will need to authorize Prisma, who will just need your email address to sign you up in the platform. And that's still work in progress. Yes, that's maybe a disclaimer I can give that we're currently working on this. So yes, some policing is bound to happen here. So I have some projects, I have added them already. So when you add a new project, you will be able to get your repositories. And you can set a project name or a project handle. And here's an interesting thing. You can define the path to your schema file, your Prisma schema file. So if you have something like a monorepo that you have imported and you want to target a specific folder where you have a Prisma schema file there, you can do this with this setting. And you can also define the branch that you want to target. So this will be useful if you want to create different Prisma projects here on the cloud, on the data platform, for different environments. So you might have an online database that uses the schema on the main branch. You might have a staging environment which uses a different online database that reads the schema from the, let's say, develop branch. So that might be a useful setting to accommodate for these workflows. I have already created a project, so I've clicked on that, and there you can manage your settings and change the names. But of course, you can also, and this is the nice part here, you can add someone to your project. And we're using the GitHub username. This is what we're using as an identifier in our platform. And you can assign them to one of the 4 roles that we have. They can be an admin, collaborator, developer, or viewer. The admin will be able to do everything that you can, so they can invite users and delete content. Collaborators and developers are pretty much the same. They will be able to edit content, but in the future, when we have more features, they will have more differentiation. And the viewers, like Sid, what I added here, is they can only view data. So if now going to the data browser, if I was Sid, I would not be able to add a record or edit or delete any data. And this is, of course, very familiar to you. It's the same interface. We took that local studio on the cloud. And this is live data, actually. This is live data that is coming from my online app and database. So this is working. So these were the features that I showed you, but I would like to maybe showcase how you might use this. I'm going to show a couple of three, actually, use cases that came from our research in the beginning of the year. So let's say you're a part of, let me go back, of a team that is 2 developers. You might have a client if you're an agency, or this might be your product manager. You might have a support colleague. And a good use case is that you want to give your developer colleague access to the schema and data. One, because they might want to edit the data themselves as they're debugging things. It could be another case where you might have someone who doesn't have the project checked out. Could be an engineering manager who doesn't have the project checked out and Postgres installed locally, but they want to view something on the data browser. So you invite them, you give them a developer role, considering that you are an admin yourself, and then they can go in and view the data and the schema also. You can also infer the schema from the studio now. Of course, in the future, we plan to add a dedicated page where you will view the schema and maybe edit this in the future. Another use case is having a client who wants to add some content before you launch an application, and you don't want to set up an admin panel. So you just give them access to that. They go in as a collaborator, and they edit the content. They add the content. They fix some typos, and then you launch. And finally, you might have, after you have launched and you have customers, you have people using your product, you might have a support representative that needs to have a look into the database. And while they're talking to the customer, they want to see which group, for example, this customer is. What is their history? What actions have they taken in your database? And you want to give them a viewer role because they need to retrieve this information, but you want to make sure that nothing gets edited by mistake. So these are just some use cases that we have researched and uncovered, but we're of course interested in how you will use the data browser once we launch it, and can let us know in on Slack, everywhere. So to recap, I talked about the long-term vision, the Prisma Data Platform with all these data mesh and data catalog and control plane and development environments components. And I also talked about the first step that we're taking towards this vision, something like an MVP, if you may, which is the data browser. And with regards to our team, the developer productivity, and what we might do on this new cloud product after the data browser, is that we'll continue on this theme of changing the context, or maybe reintroducing the existing tools that you have for your local workflows to the cloud for an online and collaborative use case. So we did this with Studio, and we brought this to the cloud with the data browser. And now we're thinking of stretching across the Prisma adoption journey, or your Prisma adoption journey. So when someone new with Prisma gets started on the left of this diagram, normally now you would have to set up Postgres locally. And if you don't have Postgres installed, good luck installing that, Docker or whatever leftover files you might have then. But what we're thinking is that we might want to make this easier for you to get started. So with a nice provisioning mechanism, you could maybe provision a Heroku Postgres, a free database just to get started. We're also working closely with PlanetScale and CockroachDB, who are 2 cloud database providers for MySQL and Postgres. And once you do that, you have your project. We have a lot of repos of project templates with vanilla Prisma, with Express, with GraphQL, with Apollo Server, with Nexus. And you can use one of these. You will be able to use one of these templates, which will connect to one of these online databases. And you will be able, of course, to use the data browser on them. And then you will be able to deploy them and view sort of this, the other end of your changes, view them on production with a light integration to Heroku, Vercel, or Netlify. We're still looking into these platforms. And after this, we want to fill the missing holes. So when it comes to schema, managing your schema, you now edit your file locally and you push it, you run your migration workflows. We think that there might be a case where you want to visualize this schema. You want to visualize all the different relations and you want to send this diagram to your colleagues and then you collaborate on this. Or maybe you want to have a quick UI to first 2 or 3 models without worrying about any typos or any constraints. You might want to then to the right query test drive some of your Prisma queries before you add them to your application, and maybe you have some bugs and then it crashes. So what we want to do with this is that we want to close the feedback loop between you making a change in your schema, then testing a query, seeing that it not works. So then you go and make another change in your schema and then run the query. So this feedback loop between these two things, we'd like to bring this shorter so that then you have something working without having touched or installed any kind of infrastructure to your computer. And when everything is ready and set up, then you can pull this down to your local workflow and then start developing your application and just worrying about your application logic. So back to this diagram, our team is tackling the control plane. We have another team that is planning to start work on the data mesh, but that doesn't mean that the existing tools will be left behind. We still have a dedicated team that is working on the client, and they're actually now working on the MongoDB connection. The migration team, they have a lot of great ideas for the future for the migration tool. So we will keep evolving and supporting the existing tool sets, and then we will add more stuff around this in order to fulfill the Prisma Data Platform vision. The launch date is the April of 28th. This is when we will probably communicate more officially with you that the Prisma Data Platform and the smaller part, the hosted studio, is online, so you can go in and sign up. But it's already functional. You saw that there are some things that we're still working in this sprint in visual terms, but it's functional. So if you are in dire need of giving access to your colleagues or customers of your online data, you can let me know through one of these channels, even also on Slack, and I will give you access to that. So that's it. Thank you.
Spiros, thank you so much for the presentation. That was quite insightful, and I have a couple of questions if you don't mind.
Perfect.
So you sort of showed in the diagram, you spoke about the control plane and the data mesh. Are these components going to be self-hosted by users, or is the control plane going to be hosted by us? How is that going to work, just so potential viewers might be interested?
So again, these are thoughts that we're having, and the default mode would be online. We would host this for you, of course, but we don't exclude the possibility that you will be able to host this on-prem. Especially when it comes to databases, sometimes you want to be more secure and you want to put things behind your firewall. So the data mesh component, maybe more than often, the data mesh component would be sitting closer to the user's infrastructure.
And would the two be communicating with each other? Is that?
Yes, exactly. So you can think of it's a metaphor I'm using internally. Maybe I'm repeating myself, but it's kind of like you have the car and this is the data mesh, and the control plane is the steering wheel. You interact to the data mesh through the steering wheel.
Gotcha.
It has more buttons than a steering wheel, of course. Like you can do plenty of stuff, play music, play video games, all these kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's more than a steering wheel.
And what kind of teams? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of viewers out there who like view this and they're like, "Oh, this is interesting, but I'm not sure if this is really for me." So, when sort of working on this and iterating and prototyping this, what kind of teams do you have in mind when sort of designing this?
Larger teams for sure, even though smaller, like people who are testing something out, just like you saw in the last slides, where you would be able to quickly spin up an online database. This is not something that needs a huge team to do that. You can already do this on your own. But then when it comes, for example, to introduce this whole Prisma idea from your personal project to your company, you would have all this surrounding infrastructure that takes care of the questions that your, let's say, CTO might ask you that, okay, all these data sources, what about performance? What about security? What about encryption? What about, like, we have 10 teams across the world who manage and gatekeep their own databases. How would you be able to find the right data? This whole diagram aims to answer these questions.
I see. So I guess this is like really a tool that can grow with you. I mean,
Yes.
whether you're starting as a solo entrepreneur on a project and you're growing and you bring on more engineers and you suddenly have a lot more concerns in your company, then
Exactly.
this can really address some of those things. I see. And is there anything that you can speak about when it comes to pricing? Is this going to be especially the data browser that's going to be available soon?
That's a good question because it also ties back to the previous question. So there will always be an open source layer of tools that we offer. For example, the migration tooling, the client, the studio, all of these are going to be free, right? And these are things you can use on your own, as well as the thing that we're launching now. The data browser, the hosted data browser, will be free. We will introduce pricing in a few quarters. We're now kind of trying to figure out the mechanics and the specifics of this. And once we introduce pricing, one thing that we might price will be the roles. The roles that you assign someone as a viewer or an admin, but it's going to be an early access tool, so we're not going to introduce pricing yet.
I see. Cool. Well, it's really exciting. I was quite glad to try that also earlier this week. So I couldn't be more excited for the rest of you who might have the opportunity to try this out in the coming weeks. And with that, I'd like to thank you again, Spiros, for coming on and for sharing the vision. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Nothing, just that, again, talk to us if something that we saw today resonated with you, or you feel that there's something missing, or you might also feel strongly that we're going the wrong direction. Talk to us, and we want to have these conversations.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on, Spiros.
Thank you for having me.